Meeting. Today is August 1st, 2023, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. Town Clerk.
Commissioner Goldberg. Commissioner Peters,
Here.
Commissioner David,
Present.
Vice Mayor Stern, Mayor Moore,
Present,
Town Manager Labadie,
Present.
and Town Attorney Tercibia.
Present.
and if we could all rise for the pledge. Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And before we get started, if everyone could please silence their devices. Are there any changes to the agenda? If there are no changes, could we have a motion to approve?
I move that we accept the agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, the first item is the presentations proclamations, and we have resolution number 2023-015. A resolution of the Town Commission of Highland Beach ratifying the selection, appointments, and term of office of members of the Natural Resources Preservation Advisory Board and providing for an effective date. And so we are fortunate enough to have two applicants. And I guess I'd like to start with Mr. Ken Schreiberg. If you want, Schreiberg, I'm sorry. If you could please come to the podium, just say a couple of things about yourself, and then each of us will ask you a question.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome.
My name's Ken Schreiberg. I have lived over in Regency Highland for 23 years. I was active with as a board member when I first moved in and helped the association replenish its property, including the windows, doors, and other components. I just finished a 5-year stint as a board of director for the Florida Association of Public Insurance Adjusters, which is the largest national public adjuster association in the nation. We have, well, I'm still a member, so I say we. We have over 900 members in total. And I was also on approximately 8 or 9 committees as well, in assistance to the board. Additionally, I helped as a co-chair revamp the Unlicensed Activity Fraud Committee, which used to be UPPA, Unlicensed Practice of Public Adjusting, by others who didn't have a license, and revamp that to be a little bit more all-inclusive of anybody who's acting in insurance, the insurance arena without a license, appropriate licensing. My education is in criminal justice. I was awarded the Criminal Justice Award in my university and the highest grade point average for the curriculum. I have owned and still own multiple businesses, some of which have performed internationally. I've lived abroad in Asia, and since I retired from the Board of Public Adjusters, I'm looking to further my service to help others. And I was really impressed by this commission and all that you have done over the years.
Great, thank you very much. And with that, we'll just go through each of the commissioners. Commissioner Goldberg, if you want to start.
I want to thank you for putting in your application. You have a sterling background in business and in so many different industries. I was interested if you could speak about your interest in the Natural Resources Preservation Board particularly.
Yeah, so when I joined FAPIA, I applied and got accepted to as many committees as possible because I wanted to educate myself and then be able to apply that. And I'm a private investigator also, so apply that towards taking something apart and helping make it better from the knowledge that I gained from others. So when I applied for the different boards here, it asked me to list them. So I actually just listed them in the order of my knowledge. The preservation committee or preservation components are something that I don't know that much about particularly, but I'm wanting to learn from others and apply my other backgrounds and my other knowledge to helping that group.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great.
Yeah, and thank you for applying for this. You got a nice resume. I, being a fellow criminal justice with degrees, I'm proud, but I wasn't at the top of my class. I wasn't on the bottom either, but anyway, but thank you. I think you're going to be a big asset to the board. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for becoming involved in the town. And hopefully this is just the first of many boards that you will be on. Yes, based on your background, I think you will bring a unique perspective to this advisory board, and I think you'll be a good addition.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for applying. Excellent background. I guess to piggyback on the first question that was asked of you, this was your, I believe, your fifth choice versus the first choice. Are you comfortable in being on this board primarily versus waiting for one of the other boards?
Most definitely, and the reason being, and I apply my past to the example is when I joined FAPIA, I wasn't involved in any of the committees at that time, except for the one that qualified me to be on the board. However, people thought I was crazy that I actually signed up for every committee that I could join. And I did, and I was active in every single one of them. I think I only, out of 8 or 9 committees, over 5 years, I think I was only absent one time and participated in all the activities. And like I said, where I could help use my experiences to make the committee perform better for the board. That's where I applied myself, and I look forward to doing the same here.
Sounds like you got a good vote from up there. You're well qualified, and thank you very much for applying.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, welcome. I'm really glad that you have volunteered. It's really refreshing to have different residents come before these boards and volunteer and give their time. Any particular initiative that you're interested in with this board?
Well, I was reading about the Sea Turtles program that was being worked on. I was watching some of the past videos of the board as well as the commission. Besides the sea turtles and the dunes, I know are important. And pretty much those are the ones that I know, and I look forward to learning more and then trying to apply myself.
Yeah, that's great. I like the way the chairperson put it, that you bring a different lens, for the board, and I think that's excellent. So, okay, terrific. And we have a second applicant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have a second applicant today. Let's see. Dr. Alan Bloomberg, if you want to come up. So if you could state your name and where you live and say a few things.
Alan Blumberg. I live in Regency Highland here in Highland Beach. It's a pleasure for me to be here addressing this distinguished body. I have spent my whole life studying the ocean, the interaction between water offshore of a city and a city. I call that the urban ocean, as opposed to the open ocean and coastal ocean. My studies have taken me all over the world to address beach erosion, flooding, things of that nature, having to do with the physics of water. I don't know much about biology, except I like to go to latitudes and have seafood. I've been very lucky in my career to be able to do this all the time. I went to Johns Hopkins University. I have a PhD in ocean physics. And I have a company in Silicon Valley that's not doing that well, but we're all about quantifying risk in a changing climate. I don't know what else to say,
Okay,
but I'm
that's right. No,
very
thank
happy
you.
to take questions.
Wonderful. Thank you. We'll just go through each commissioner. Commissioner Goldberg.
Well, I want to welcome you to Highland Beach.
Thank you.
And it's really just so encouraging and impressive, the quality of the applicants that we receive here. And you are absolutely outstanding. I think that if I were to draw a picture of, who would be perfect, someone with your background, your education, your whole scope of professional life will be a benefit here. Thank you very much for applying.
You're welcome. I've had a very lucky career, I have to say.
Yeah, Doctor, thank you for applying there. I mean, your credentials are outstanding, just ocean engineering, hydro science, weather prediction. That's says it all. Thank you. And you're a big asset. We might be calling on you for other things.
Hurricane.
That's right. Yes.
I know how to do that. But look out.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Good afternoon, Dr. Bloomberg. I'm blown away by your credentials, quite frankly. I can't imagine anyone better qualified to be on the Natural Resources Board. It just,
Thank you.
and I welcome your contribution to the town. And again, welcome to the town. It's a good place to live.
Very happy to be here.
Thank you for applying, extremely well qualified, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. Welcome to the board and welcome to Highland Beach. I guess my one question, is there any specific initiative on the board that you are particularly interested in?
Well, I'm very interested in beach erosion, problems with ocean and the beach. We don't want to lose this wonderful resource. I know that here it's a little difficult because the beaches are private. So we'll have to figure out the best way to manage all that. Sometimes there's a lot of pollution on the beach, not, natural pollution. We have to figure out how to clean it better and better as time goes on. And the intracoastal is fabulous.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for volunteering. You're new to the town and really thank you for stepping in, right away. So that's terrific.
My
Well,
pleasure.
yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't know if there are any other additional comments. I think we have two excellent applicants. Thank you so much for stepping forward. If we could have a motion, please.
Second,
All in favor, say aye.
aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much for applying. We are really excited to have both of you join. Okay, next item on the agenda are announcements, board vacancies. Oh, I'm sorry. Any public comments? I skipped right by that. No public comments. See, I knew there were no public comments.
Right.
Announcements, board vacancies, Board of Adjustment and Appeals. We've got 2 vacancies, all for 3-year terms, and 1 vacancy for an unexpired term ending September 21st, 2024. Upcoming meetings and events, August 8th at 1 p.m. We have the Code Enforcement Board regular meeting. August 10th at 9:30 in the morning, we have the Planning Board regular meeting. And then 2 weeks from today, August 15th at 1:30, we have our Town Commission meeting. And we do have a board action report from the Financial Advisory Board workshop meeting of July 27th by board member Dr. Richard Greenwald.
Sounds ominous.
I know, right?
Yes.
Afternoon, everybody. Rick Greenwald, Tranquility Drive. Couple of apologies as I begin. I'm a board member. I am not the chair nor the vice chair of the Financial Advisory Board. Ron Riami expressed his regrets that he couldn't be with us today. Second point is that we did not have a quorum at our last meeting, and therefore what we held was a workshop. As most of you, I think, or I'm sure all of you know, the Financial Advisory Board is tasked to make recommendations rather than decisions. So today we will talk about not formal recommendations, but some of the items that came up for discussion during this what turned out to be a workshop session. So what took place is that initially reports were given by Dave Delina and by Marshall regarding the financial reports, audit reports, and budget reports. As the commission has actually seen these reports several times at prior meetings, it was the first time for the Financial Advisory Board to be seeing those in formal meeting setting. And the presentations at this, by the time we saw them, were extremely well polished and well received, let's say. There seemed to be very good agreement amongst the members present and available via Zoom that the overall budget, while significantly increased over prior years, was readily understandable in light of inflation, new projects and services, particularly but not exclusively related to the new fire rescue department. It was, however, pointed out in a few cautionary comments that from the resident viewpoint, that although the budget is proposed to hold the tax millage rate steady, which is obviously something the residents are looking forward to, that that's not the total cost to residents, and that there have been significant increases in usage rates. So, for example, there will be a very significant increase in waste management, solid waste. And there are also increases in the budget as it relates to water and sewer. Again, all understandable, and when we were through asking questions and getting answers, which were readily provided, there were no significant or immediate concerns voiced by anybody present regarding the proposed budget or the town's excellent financial status. As part of the discussion about budgeting for capital projects, we also talked a little bit about a proposed project that has been postponed over the last several years, namely the potential for relining of the town's sewer lines. And it was pointed out by Marshall that Pat Roman and others will be developing a capital plan for future expenditures in this area. As it looks like after the completion of the fire department, this will be one of the larger capital concern items going forward, and that having been involved with this for a while, the projected budget originally for these sewer repairs were maybe $1.5 million spread over a multiple year period. And it now certainly looks like, well, we don't have a final estimate, that's going to be a lot more than that. So that's going to require significant planning. And we were assured that it has a steady place on the radar, and that again, it's all under consideration, which is good. Very briefly, the question of health insurance options for employees were brought up. As this, at the time of the meeting, this was still under negotiation for this year's budget. It was therefore a variable, both in terms of what the increases might be, as well as the possibility of changing vendors. And several of those pointed out that in addition to cost, it's extraordinarily important that the quality of medical care services and availability, particularly in terms of networks and physician panels when shifting providers, be considered in the final decisions. And then finally, in a totally separate item for consideration, Eric Murmer reviewed a revised purchasing policy designed to modify limits as with significant inflation that has occurred over the last several years. It was felt by people involved in purchasing that our current limits were too low in certain areas. And that changing them and changing the process would make the whole purchasing process much more efficient and somewhat less bureaucratic, perhaps. There were multiple questions, multiple clarifications as we considered this. These were answered to everyone's satisfaction, and at the conclusion of that discussion, there were no major concerns expressed by any members regarding the proposed changes. And that's basically it. The members present complimented David and his staff for the clean audit findings and his pledge to move future audits earlier in the calendar year. We thought that would be helpful for everybody, including the FAB in its considerations. And those present also expressed thanks to Marshall, David, and all the other department heads and their staffs for their professionalism and hard work. And that's the report. Any questions?
Do we have, I don't really have questions, but maybe discussion, among us, and you could perhaps stay there. So the rise in costs, it seems, I totally agree with the comments. The budget has gone up. Is there, and it sounds like there is no concern. I guess my opinion is it's been in line with there's nothing, in my opinion, it isn't really out of the ordinary. Any discussion about that, whether the rise in cost is out of the ordinary?
I think as I tried to indicate, there were no formal votes taken, so I
Right.
can't really say from the comments. I did specifically ask the group, does anyone have any real concerns about anything? And there was no response. So I think that in general, people are satisfied. I know that I personally am not concerned about this year. I'm a little bit concerned, and I'm sure you are as well, going forward. Because for the last several years, we've had huge boosts in our revenue, if you will, without having to raise millage rates because of the phenomenal, I mean, we all applaud this, but really or extraordinary increases in assessed property values. I mean, it went up 13.2%, I think, this year. So that, is probably not something that's a long-term sustainable figure. Certainly historically it isn't. Which means that, there's going to need to be some caution presumably exercised as we move, potentially as we move forward. But that's all. No one had any concerns about the work that was going on now or any of that. And the same goes as I said, we talked about in terms of fees. I know that you were startled because it's been discussed. I mean, I certainly was, but I mean, like a doubling of the solid waste collection rates. I mean, it's crazy. And it's not a millage rate thing, but it's reflected on people's total expenditures if you're planning a budget. Water sewer, much less dramatic, but we're projecting 8% this year. It's gone up double digits in a couple of prior years. Again, in the future, and they're always going to be. This isn't a bad thing. It's just an inevitable thing. They're going to be significant capital projects again that are going to need to be funded after the fact. So that's all. Nothing. But no. Again, the conclusion were everybody was happy with the town's financial status, the work being done by staff, and the current course.
I have a question with respect, Mr. Greenwald, to the purchasing amounts, the purchasing limits. And I'd like to know from by the committee, was there expression as to the impact on the budgeting that has on our budgets?
Well, it was felt, actually, I mean, we talked about it, it was felt that whatever the change in process was, it was not going to have a significant effect on the budget. It was mostly going to be, particularly in the item range that was now going to be under $10,000. that it would make the purchasing process much more efficient. Still needs to be approved by multiple individuals within the town governance. It's not, I think I'll go buy something. I mean, other people have to sign off on it. It just has to do with, I'm not an expert on this because I was learning about it at this meeting. So more details should probably come from Marshall, but the goal was to try and, for some things at a certain level, you start needing 3 sealed bids. And you'll see when you look at the contracts that you guys review for expensive things, or some of the individual items aren't that expensive, but consolidated things like you'll hear from our fire chief today for 200 and whatever $1,000 in the budget. That's a very cumbersome, bidding process, and that's a good thing, but you don't want to go through a process like that every time somebody wants to buy a new copying machine. It just becomes too cumbersome, or at least that's what people make these decisions tell us. And at the end of their explanations, we were willing to go along with that. The process is still the same, actually, as you get to the higher ticket items. But I don't want to sell myself as an expert on this at all, because I was largely learning about it for the first time at our meeting. So I would urge that if there are further comments, either Eric can answer them. He answered a lot that'll be on the video, I guess, from our meeting, or maybe Marshall can do.
I think it's important to note that even though there was an official quorum, there was a majority of the board there. And the comments the input was very good. I watched the video. I thought it was an excellent meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, for Marshall, that purchasing policy, does that come before the town commission to
Yep,
approve? Okay.
it's coming August or September. I'm looking at Teresa Linnell.
Okay.
September. So, as Dr. Greenwald was saying, some items aren't that big of a deal to purchase off of contracts. What I think we didn't make as clear as we could have is it's mostly, we find a lot of trouble around services, and I'll look at Pat and Sergio in the back from the Public Works team. Irrigation line explodes or pump, and it's usually 1,500 to 2,000. We have a hard time getting 3 people to even show up here to give us a bid, because they know, working for a municipality, that we're looking for other people's bids. So is it worth their time in the day to come from Boynton Beach, drive all the way out here to give us a quote when they probably know they're not going to get it? So it's those type of purchases that have really been difficult for us. Getting an electrician here to, put some new outlets in, or we something burned out and it's, $800 worth of work. You're not, we have to stop, wait 3 weeks to have all these people come in, give us a bid. We're having a hard time getting people to come in. Larger ticket items are fine. We can go through that process, but I would remind us that we've had several, multi-million-dollar projects where we don't even get bidders. Even through the sealed bid process, people don't want to come out because it's just, there's so much work. The time it takes to come in, to fill out those formal solicitations, this and that, and or they know if they show up, they just aren't going to get the job, because we fish it enough and spend a month or 2 trying to find somebody, they're not, driving out of their way. So it was a good conversation. Give Eric a little bit of practice. The Financial Advisory Board asked some good questions, so we could be a little bit more prepared for follow-up and give more examples. But it will be coming before the commission. We aligned with adjacent communities, so we're not, picking numbers just for Highland Beach. We're kind of matching Palm Beach, Boca, Delray. What are people doing? FEMA, what are the guidelines for FEMA on emergency acquisition? So we're in that same space. And Dr. Greenwald was correct. No one's just out there buying randomly. They have to go through yet another, process, best management practice, where not only does the employee do it, then the department head would have to sign off, then David and the finance team, then it comes back to me, then it goes back. So there's a lot of checks in that system to make sure it isn't, out there. Plus, we require a lot of licensure and insurance requirements. So it does at times challenge the process, but it's coming. Yep.
Okay, great. Look forward, and thank you very much for the report. Really appreciate it, and really good discussion at the meeting. Next item on the agenda, ordinances. So we have the fire code proposed ordinance. which is an ordinance to adopt the current edition of the Florida Fire Prevention Code and provide for local amendments, providing for the repeal of all ordinances in conflict, provide for severability and codification, and provide for an effective date. Matt came, oops. We had an introduction of this item at the last meeting, and now this is the first reading. And have there been any changes since?
No, I don't believe we had any changes after it was introduced.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions about it? I do have a couple questions. I don't mind getting started. I guess a couple things that caught my eye. So there was something about, I don't know if it was when, let's see, it's on page 32. I don't know if it was when you do the fireworks, and it mentioned something about requiring like $1 million. When you get a permit for fireworks, you need to have $1 million in insurance coverage. And I guess I get concerned about like dollar amounts, they easily get out of date, but that's kind of standard practice.
Yeah, as far as having that insurance in place, it's more for the town were to decide to have a fireworks show. And whoever would come in to do that, would, you certainly want them to be insured. If there's some sort of accident or something that happened, you'd want to make sure that that liability was covered.
Oh, so that's for
It's
if you
not
were to
for-
hire someone. I thought it was if one of the residents wanted to.
Yeah,
do
we've had
fire-
that before. I'll jump in. I apologize, but if you remember that email exchange that I shared with all of you around New Year's, there was a resident that wanted to do a show just as big as a municipal show that you would see. They just wanted it. So we would want that insurance in case it blows back into other people's property, hurts somebody. So a lot of these providers, this $1 million is nothing. This is a standard fare that they require for all that to do the actual show for somebody else. If you hire somebody, they're going to carry that level plus
Yeah,
on a
I just wondered, like, does that dollar amount?
To the law change under Florida Statute 781, where people are allowed to use, fireworks, spark, any of the, some of the stuff that is not on the sparkler list. Those 3 days, which is July 4th, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. That's not what that's about. And they don't have to come get a permit for that. That's in the statute. They're just allowed.
And they're not required to have insurance for doing that, I guess.
I can only tell you that we do have accidents frequently, related to fireworks. We're going to be putting out, Vice Mayor Stern asked us to put something together, which we have. When it gets closer to the next time, there's a day that they're allowed to use the fireworks. We'll post that. That's some of the things we've been working on in general, is putting together some safety messages and different things so that we can start posting things out to the residents now that we're moving forward. Got several things put together unrelated to fireworks, but you'll start seeing some things coming out from the fire department there relatively soon.
Okay, so that provision actually does not apply to those 3 days. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Well, not for those types of fireworks.
Um,
If somebody wants to have it, as city manager stated, somebody wants to come here and put on a show that's under NFPA 1123 and 1124, which is a production, if you will, the type of show that a municipality would, bring somebody in and they'd have a, 10 to 20 minute, show, maybe put a barge offshore or do something from the coastal side. That's what that is about, that type of permit. And also if a resident were to want to do something to that level, they would also come in and they have to get permission from the city to do it. That's kind of what, that's all about.
And that can be any day of the year, or is that only limited to those
Any time
3
of
days?
year.
That can be any day of the year.
with the permitted commission approval, you can do a show like that. And if you hire, again, you're hiring somebody to
They would
do
have that
the
coverage.
fireworks for you. They would have the insurance similar if you're having a holiday party or some sort or a birthday party and you hire a private bartending service. They usually have insurance to cover themselves for those type of
So
situations.
before this, we didn't have this ability and now we do, because this had come up before, right?
It was, the city had adopted the Delray Beach.
Yeah.
Fire rescues fire ordinance, and that was in their ordinance as well.
Oh, it was.
So now
Oh,
we're,
okay.
some of the things that are in,
Oh,
some,
okay.
some of the things that are in the ordinance are things that we're bringing over and putting directly into the ordinance for the town, because we're
taking control of that now.
Right, and so the thing about the radio communication requirements for buildings, so it looked like there was a requirement for like new buildings. And so how does it apply to existing buildings?
Well, all the state of Florida passed a state statute. I can't remember the specific number, but they do require that by the end of 2024, and all this could change. But they do require that you have gone out and permitted or got a permit to install or upgrade the buildings so that our radios work, police and fire radios work inside the buildings. And there's timelines for existing buildings, and then obviously a newly constructed building that fits into that time, into that category, would have to have it done immediately as part of their, they would turn in plans with the radio stuff as part of the submittal for review. So, but all the existing buildings, it's an unfunded mandate, similar to the fire sprinkler one that was put in place, a long time ago. And, the legislature, continues to kind of move that down the line. I mean, there's a lot of the work getting done, just so you know. I mean, people want to get this done. They're much safer if we can use our radios.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering about. I didn't see, for existing buildings, whether that or not that was required. And
High rise
so
buildings.
it is, it is in high rise buildings, it is, but a certain, if it has a certain number of floors.
Right. So in new construction, we're gonna, we want to make sure that our radios work in any new construction that meets certain size requirements, because a big building, I mean, it's unlikely we're gonna have that size building, but in big buildings, commercial buildings, doesn't have to be tall to have a problem with your radio.
Is that the BDA?
Yes, bidirectional amplification, but if you go through, they go through a testing process first to determine whether or not there's this issue with signal. And and this is all through the FCC. They have to, whoever the license holder in the area is, they have to go through them. Because we don't want to have so much signal strength and, buildings right next to each other. You have to, all these things could override and actually, cause problems from one building to the next. It has to be done in a very systematic way. And, one building could have an effect on another. So these, it's kind of an ongoing challenge to make sure that, we're not getting interference as we go through this too.
So when you do the inspections for the buildings, that's part of the inspection
Correct.
process. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I go back to
Of course.
fireworks for a second? I just want to get a little clarity on it, because one of the emails I was party to, and so are there any regulations, number one, on how close to a structure the fireworks are, or can they, because that was one of the issues. People were setting it off and they were going on balconies. And
So I'll call the personal fireworks, the stuff that you can go out west, off of, Lage Road and whatever the cross street is, right down the other side of the turnpike, and go purchase fireworks.
I'm relating the question to these 3 days within Highland Beach.
Yeah, so there's really not, I mean, and unfortunately, there's really not anything there's warnings on the fireworks themselves about, distances and all those kinds of things. And NFPA 11, 23 and 24 for the large fireworks, the fireworks shows, there are definitely distance requirements there, depending on the size of the shell that's used. There's also fireworks that are called close proximity fireworks, which can be as close as 15 feet from a building. It's a different type of firework, and those are regulated as well. Close proximity or the full force fireworks. So as far as sparklers and those kinds of things, that's why we're going to be putting out a safety message and try and get people to understand that stay proper distances. Watch out for your neighbors, watch for fallout, wind direction. Those things are all very important. The best thing that we can say about it is, there's plenty of fireworks shows out there. Go somewhere and watch one in a safe, manner for you, your family, and your friends.
What's the checks and balances on those 3 days, for example, or if there's violations to what the restrictions are? What does one do?
Okay, so on every day but those 3 days, if there's a list that the state puts out, they call it the sparkler list, which is, certain things that they don't shoot, they don't explode. They stay on the ground. Everything is just sitting there on the ground and it's like a cone with sparks and stuff like that. Very stationary type of products. And they put a list out every year like that. Other than those 3 days, if somebody is using the larger fireworks, the ones that report, the ones that are in the tubes that shoot off, they can be arrested because they're not allowed to use them in the state of Florida. The challenge is on those 3 days, they are, and they've, again, as a fire person for, the last 30 years, I don't agree with it, but I can't really do anything about it on those 3 days. Otherwise, we can work with the police department. If we see something that is dangerous on any other day and try to get out there. The best thing we can do right now is message people, try and get them to understand to use these things in a safe manner. I can only tell you every year we have some problem with the misuse of fireworks, whether it's a fire, injuries, primarily injuries. It's just
Is there anything we should put in the ordinance about this?
we're not really allowed to do anything in the ordinance on those 3 days.
Or not even proximity wise? Can we can't outline, I think that was a good suggestion, like if we had some rule that you can't put anything, you can't put anything in an ordinance that says how close to a structure.
Yeah. State knows best on this issue, I guess. Yeah,
Okay,
just be careful out there.
okay.
David, are you finished?
I asked the question last time. I just wanted to reassure everything that's in the Delray presently is being transferred in here is covered in our ordinance. Is there anything being left out or added?
There's some things that we added more related to how our fire department will function. For example, in the future, any newly constructed properties, keep in mind, a lot of the stuff has to do with anything newly constructed. We can't really change anything that's existing unless the Florida Fire Prevention Code, NFPA 101, the existing code, there is an existing code section that changes every 3 years, and those things we can apply to existing buildings. That's the intent of that. But as far as that goes, I'll give you an example. Based on our initial response to a fire, it would be best for us to have hydrants within 50 feet of fire department connections. So if we need to connect to the building, that operation, one person can do. If you go to what the Florida Fire Prevention Code says, 100 feet, trying to drag a piece of 5-inch hose 100 feet to make your connection with one person. And, we're trying to get a couple people in the building, get people ready to respond. If we do have a fire, we want to be in the building and taking care of that within a short time. We also need a water supply. So that water supply should be connected as quickly as possible. So in new construction, that's something that wasn't in Delray's. There's some things that I tried to, from an operational perspective, think about how we were going to be working in some of the buildings that we have. We do have a lot of high-rise buildings. That's primarily what we have. So, to me, speed is of the essence. The quicker we can get to something, the better. And, keep that in check faster. Fortunately, most of the buildings in town are sprinkler. So, that's going to help us. My part of my first order of business, as I spoke about last time, was to get together with some of the condominium board, try and get into some of the buildings. Right now, I know of 5 or 6 properties that are putting in new fire pumps, for example. And those are the ones that, I know about currently. So those are big projects that need to get done. And I'm sure just based on some of the age of the structures here, that they're not the only ones that are dealing with those types of issues. And as we transition from Delray to our own, watch on these things, I think we're going to find some things that, either may have been a little bit neglected. And I'm not putting that on Delray. I'm just saying that, we're going to be a much more hands-on, involved in the community kind of approach to this. The fire crews, when they're out, are going to be going into buildings doing, training. But when I say training, going in and learning about all the buildings. So if they need to respond there, they're gonna know before they get there, have a picture in their head about what that building's like and what they need to do when they first arrive. Every building's different. They're all architecturally different. Some of the features are different, and over time, they've evolved, the fire features in those buildings have evolved over 30, 40, 50 years. So, they have to know what to expect, and so we're gonna be much more hands-on. And I hope everybody appreciates that. It's not to catch people doing things that need to get fixed, it's to really make sure that everybody's safe, and I think hopefully that was one of the goals that y'all were after when you decided to make this decision to start your own department.
Last question I have is, just hearing this specifically, the requirements on lightning rods and standards on buildings.
Okay, so there is a NFPA standard for lightning protection. I can only, I know that the newer buildings certainly have those in place. I don't know how far, I can't remember how far back that standard was put in place, but certainly all new construction requires lightning protection. That's part of the submittal that would have to come in. Again, in the life safety code, it doesn't go back and say that existing buildings that don't have lightning protection are required to have it. Is it a good idea? Is it a potential project, something to discuss with some of the boards to make sure that those things are in place if they want to, make that capital improvement? That's a good idea. But I can't say that all the buildings have that level of lightning protection that would be.
What about required, for example, if a total roof is being replaced, is there a requirement in getting approval and to put appropriate lightning protection devices on those roofs?
If it was an existing system and it was going to be affected, they would have to, maintain that system. If they needed to remove it temporarily and put it back, they would have to put it back as it was originally designed. But again, if they're going to do that level of alteration on a building, I mean, we're seeing it out here right now. All the concrete restoration, your lightning protection system is going to be an exterior system. So, it's something that would be advisable to address if they don't have that system in place. Because if your building gets hit by lightning, it's going to damage other systems in the building, no matter what. Just the way it works. In addition to the life safety aspects of it. So I 100% agree with the concept and looking into that, and we can do that. Right now, I don't have in the ordinance, and I don't believe that we can put in the ordinance the ability to force them to do that. We can put anything in the ordinance that we want. Whether that gets challenged somewhere along the way is kind of the issue. So what I have in that ordinance is there's nothing in there. Everything that's in there is based on what we're allowed to do under NFPA, Florida Statute 633. As far as making local amendments, everything in there strengthens what the minimum requirements are for the Florida Fire Prevention Code and some of the standards that are adopted in there. So we're not doing anything that to weaken the code, certainly, just enhance the code.
Do we have a lot of more stringent requirements in here than is in the states?
No, some of the things that are in there, like signage and different things like that, right? It's not so much to strengthen things, it's to provide a more detail on how we would prefer it to be done, because a lot of the code might say you have to do this, but it doesn't give like a specific, and it allows us to be more specific as to how we want signage done, size of signage, letters, those types of things. That's just one example, but there's really, I've gone through these when, I don't want to talk a little history, when I was at Boca and elsewhere, and tried to, actually remove things because some of it would just be redundant to what is already in the fire code, and not trying to do that. We don't want to have something that's in our local ordinance that's also already in the Florida Fire Prevention Code. So the things that are in there are kind of how to do things more detailed. The one issue that was brought up regarding NFPA 1225, we had a discussion about that. That is something that is a guideline. It's a very comprehensive standard that has recently been put out. It's a 22 standard. And the reason that's there is the technology for these systems is constantly evolving. I mean, think about what your cell phone was 10 years ago and what it is now, right? And that's really what we're talking, radio signaling, all the electronics continue to improve. So, my thought, and as a discussion that we had with staff, was if we put this in, it's going to be a lot easier for the installers to do what, is current and up to date, instead of having to ask us, what do you think about this? As I sit on the Florida Fire Code Advisory Committee, that standard was one of the ones that was talked about being brought into the Florida Fire Prevention Code as a reference. The former code was NFPA 1220. And that's just like a piece. 1225 is a lot more comprehensive than just the radio signaling. It talks about dispatching and all kinds of things that doesn't really pertain to us, but it captures everything, and it just seemed like the best way to go, because they're not going to make 1220 anymore. They're not going to continue with new editions of that standard. So I still don't have a final answer as to whether the state's going to adopt it in. When I called up to the state fire marshal's office a couple of weeks ago to find out if we were going to have another committee meeting, they still weren't sure if they were kind of done with what's going to come out in January, or if we're going to take one more look at some things that have been brought up. I haven't heard anything like, hey, we have a meeting coming up. The next probable meeting is the Florida Fire Marshal and Inspectors Association Annual Conference, which is in November in Gainesville, and I will be attending that. So, we'll see if there's anything that would be the last possible shot that the state would have to make any modifications to what's going to come out in January.
Thank you. One question on section 9-274. As I read this, it says that you can use a small, under 200 inches, electric grill on a balcony.
Mhm.
Okay. That's obviously if the building itself allows it.
Well, the state fire code allows that. It used to be actually 400 square inches. It was a bigger grill. They reduced the size down to 200. So the part that I carried, and the reason that that's in there is because I went a little more detailed, capturing all other types of
Mhm.
potential grills and flame, and heat generating type of equipment. So that's why it's in there. The state statute already says the 200 square inch. That's in there.
This is essentially things that you can use inside the house,
Correct.
smokeless grills, basically.
Exactly.
Okay, are we going to give copies of this to the management in the different buildings so they understand what they have to do?
Yes, I would like Matt to be in every single building at condo meetings. I think we're going to start in Villanova, right? So we're going to
Hey,
start
that's
there.
how to get you over there, Matt.
And then we'll move into every building, but I think that would be a great idea to get us in there to create that partnership. And that's the community risk reduction, which is the other half of the fire marshal. To get us in there to keep you attuned to what's going on, changes, what's happening. We could take a look. Matt's a wealth of knowledge. So any of your systems in your condo buildings, whatever it may be, can walk you through what to look out for, how to make changes.
Yeah, because most buildings want to comply,
Right.
but if they don't know what it is, they can't comply with it.
100% agree. I haven't, in my years doing this, I mean, it's a rare instance that somebody is, doesn't want to, make sure that where they live is safe.
Mhm.
It just, doesn't make sense, right? So I don't, we don't get very much pushback on any of the things that we try to, either we make suggestions, some things need to be fixed or, done, properly corrected. We, may come across some things that, some work that was done 10 years ago that just isn't, wasn't done to permit, or they didn't pull, they didn't have a permit. That doesn't mean the building might have thought they had a permit.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, there's, you know, that's what I'm saying. There's some, you know, unscrupulous contractors out there that'll tell you, they'll put in your, you know, your quote. We're gonna pull a permit. This is what permit costs are. And then they don't pull a permit. You know, you in the building aren't gonna know that. Unless somebody happens to, you know, come across it. And we come across them. And we work with people to get those things corrected. We don't come in, you know, there is not going to be a heavy hand in the town of Highland Beach. I can promise you that. Because it's unnecessary.
Thank you.
Matt, I got a question. Fire lanes.
Mhm.
I know fire lanes are very important and according to rules, they want us to put signs up. Do we have to mark the lanes from the building? Is that what it means, I guess?
Yeah, so in the Florida Fire Prevention Code, there's direction on fire lanes. Generally speaking, fire lanes are required, you know, the AHJ can require the fire lanes. It's not, they don't specifically tell you where. And that's the thing, they don't get into the details of it. It's kind of like if you need fire lanes, the AHJ will tell you. And that more specifically kind of says the striping, the sign, how the sign should look. And the reason for that is if we don't put that in there correctly, and for example, PD goes out and says somebody parked in a fire lane and they may want to, you know, because they didn't move, or the building, you know, management says, hey, this car's been sitting here all day. We need to, you know, it shouldn't be parked where it is, you know, and PD comes out. They actually have the ability to write a parking ticket because it's now a violation. But if the way that parking is, you know, designed, it needs to have meet the standard in the ordinance, proper signage, letter, everything's got to be the right way. Otherwise, they can probably get out of it. So, you know, we need to make sure that when we're doing these things, if we need to go to a hearing or something like that, you know, we can fall back to what we have in our ordinance and say, you know, everything was properly signed, everything was done the right way. You know, the person just decided they didn't want them.
Thank you, Matt.
I do have a question that, I thank you for the more specificity and clarification, because that's certainly needed and helpful for the high rise particularly. I'd like to draw your attention to page 45, subsection 3, as far as the alarm systems, automatic extinguishing protective systems, where you mandate that there must be a written service agreement, and if there's not, what action, independent action, the
So-
town can take.
So we're not mandating that there must be a service agreement. That's already in the Florida Fire Prevention Code.
Okay,
The part of that language is in there to be more specific about some of the systems that need to have the annual inspections and the building is required to get those things done. It's not the fire department. Because all we're there to do is verify that these things have happened. And I think if you go a little bit further down,
mhm,
you'll see a section that was added that talks about using a third party reporting system, online reporting, right?
yes,
That's so that we can, you know, we have updated verification from the third party that we can immediately go into
mhm.
and make sure that all these systems are being inspected the way they're supposed to be inspected. We do not have that right now. I have no access, unfortunately, you know, I will tell you this, Delray Beach is planning on going to what we're gonna do. Boca is planning on going to it. Fort Lauderdale's already doing it. The county is already involved in that. Because it's just so hard to keep up with these systems. In any high-rise building, for example, you're gonna have a fire sprinkler system, fire alarm system, a standpipe system, a fire pump, an emergency generator, things related to elevators. There's certain things that have to be inspected annually. You know, potentially 7 or 8 different items, depending on how the building was constructed and the height of the building and all those. And in order for us to capture that data and make sure that those systems are being inspected as they're required to by state statute, you know, that's the best way we can go through instead of trying to go out and collect paper and all the stuff that's necessary. And there is no cost to the residents directly. Obviously, there's an agreement between the third-party vendors and third party system that's collecting the data, and they work that out, how they're gonna, you know, get those things paid for. I can tell you that all the vendors in our area are used to using this type of system. They don't have a problem with it because sometimes it helps them get things done in a timely manner. I mean, I could tell you, in the old days, the vendor may be saying, hey, we have a problem with the sprinkler system, or we have a failure of some valves or something that is causing the system to not work properly. And they, three inspections deep, they've been writing these things up. The Florida Fire Prevention Code only requires, for example, inspections by the fire service on a residential structure every 3 years. My plan is to be in there every year, or try to be in there every year, depending on the type of building it is. The annual inspections are more of a target hazard type thing. The hospitals, critical infrastructure, commercial buildings that are critical to the community as far as employment and those types. I mean, it kind of gives you a little bit of leeway to determine what it is, but specifically residential is just not as high. They consider as high a priority. I consider it a priority. But that's kind of the way it reads. So this helps us make sure that those life safety systems are in place
Thank you.
and operating the way they're supposed to.
The other question I have, it's really informational for me. Page 28. So this has to do with the remediation, the response costs that that the town would incur
hazardous spills.
hazardous spills.
Correct.
So, but what I'd like to hear more about, where this originated from, the 10%. If it was not paid within 30 days, 10%, and was it every month after that, another 2%?
Right.
There
So-
doesn't seem to be any stay or exception that if someone has to go out and get funding, that the interest doesn't run if there's a bona fide.
Well, here's how this works, because all this goes from federal, state, and then local. We need to have this in a means by which to capture repayment of costs for hazardous incidents in our community. Because if we don't, the state's not going to give us money to help if it's a significantly large incident. The federal government's not going to give us money if it's a even larger incident. So all these things are in place such that that we can have the appropriate people pay the cost for the errors or spills or whatever may occur. It's their responsibility. This gives us if somebody doesn't have the money to do it, we would probably request from the state what funding they can help us with. And ultimately from the federal government. But we need to have a means to capture that locally first.
So did this paragraph in particular, did that come about by adoption of the Delray?
This is typical of what, Delray has in their ordinance, all municipalities, right? You can go to every one of them, the county, they all have something like this in their local ordinance. Because if they don't, you're gonna have trouble trying to collect money from other agencies down the road.
At the same rate as specified
Yeah, I
here,
didn't change-
10%
that-
plus
That
2?
number is exactly like Bogus,
Mhm.
everything, and I didn't change that. And Delray's numbers are the same, and Delray got that from me. So,
Now, is there an assumption here that if there is a workout going on to recover the costs and
Mhm.
someone is looking for funding, whether from one of the state or municipalities or some funding,
Mhm.
private funding, is there consideration that's going to be given if they are exercising a good faith effort that extra 2% every month?
That's gonna be up to the city to decide how, that could be something, for example, they could come to the commission and ask for some relief on. They would probably first start with the city manager, come in and say, hey, we're doing our best here, can we, what are we really trying to do? And, from my perspective, is recover the cost to fix the problem that was their problem, right? The town shouldn't have to cover the cost of that. Whether it's a truck driving through that's gonna fuel boats here and something happens and they cause a spill that needs to be cleaned up. Whether somebody hits a gas line and there's cost involved with that. Just for us to provide, fire service to stand by while that leak gets repaired could take 8, 10, 12 hours. I've seen, other ones take much longer. There's a cost to that, right?
And the recovery is essential. Absolutely.
Correct. And they're typically paid by insurance companies that they've hired. All these businesses, they should have insurance to cover these types of potential accidents.
So I question for us is, should we leave it as is? And if there is a special circumstance in raising the funding, to meet an obligation under these paragraphs, under this paragraph. Should we put in the language now or let it remain for someone who has that circumstance occurring to have to come to the commission?
If you-
If you want my opinion,
Yeah,
I think leave it the way it is. I think deal with it on a case by case situation. There are not a huge number of these issues anyway. So, yeah, I wouldn't play with it at this point. I wouldn't put any language in there that combines you later on.
Yeah, I think it's a good question to bring up, but I agree, maybe just leave it and then discuss it as a group if it were to come up.
I can tell you the typical events that we have here are the 2 to 4 inch gas line that might be struck by somebody with a backhoe. And, there's a regional hazmat response to that. In our area, Boca and Delray are the regional hazmat team response. So both departments respond for those specific things when called. And for that type of incident, yeah, we would call them. They would come out and help us mitigate that problem. Would there be a big cost issue to a leaking natural gas line? Probably not. If it's just struck out in the grass and something's there, that I wouldn't worry about. These things are more of a significant incident that is very unlikely to happen. But we have to have something in place. We need to have that ability to recover the cost in place.
yeah, thank you. I agree.
Yeah, good discussion, really good discussion. Anything else?
I propose that we pass an ordinance of the town of Highland Beach, Florida, repealing chapter 9, fire prevention and protection of the town code of ordinances in its entirety and simultaneously adopting a new chapter 9 to reference the current edition of the Florida Fire Prevention Code and adopt local amendments thereto, repealing section 35-11 Florida Fire Prevention Code of the Town Code of Ordinances, providing for the repeal of all ordinances in conflict, providing for severability and codification, and providing for an effective date.
Second that.
Roll call or?
Public hearing. It's the public hearing. You have to open for public
Okay,
comment.
so are there any public comments on this? Okay, there are no public comments. Okay,
Roll
do you
call.
want a roll call?
Sure. Commissioner David,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stern,
Yes.
Commissioner Goldberg,
Yes,
Commissioner Peters,
Yeah.
and Mayor Moore.
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Matt. I think this is exactly why we did this. It's really, I'm so excited about the emphasis on our community of the fire prevention and these codes and having you here. It's excellent and it's exactly why we made this change. So
I
thank you very
appreciate that.
much.
I'm looking forward to getting into the community and trying to do some things to help improve life safety. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Okay, the next item is the consent agenda, which we have the meeting minutes from the July 18th meeting. And then also to approve a contract for the self-contained breathing device. Any discussion on the consent agenda? If none, can we have a motion, please?
I move we pass the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you.
All in favor, say aye.
I,
Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to unfinished business, the fire rescue implementation update.
So as chief comes up, we're on schedule on budget, so. that's
On
kinda
track as well?
On track.
Okay.
Everything's moving way we had hoped.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, good afternoon, rest of the commission. Just want to give a quick update again, like each meeting, just a few issues that are going on and to tell you where we are in the process. So the structural slab was supposed to be poured last week, but was moved to August 2nd, which is tomorrow, because they want to make some structural changes, sharing changes. That was done. Make it, in my opinion, better. So that's a better outcome. So that's going to be poured tomorrow. Probably all day, I think, partial, and then we're going to do two parts. Part one will be tomorrow, and I think the other part for the bay will be a different day because we're doing some more, putting some more, fixing up the steel underneath the structure. The ADA ramp is being poured on Thursday, so we'll have a fully functional ADA ramp in the back. That's been a long time coming. And you see the cinder blocks. So as soon as the slab is poured and cured, we'll be going up. So we've got a whole bunch of cinder blocks being delivered now, and some of the steel for the first floor is being stored at the vendor right now because we have no room on site. So as soon as the cinder blocks are in a good place, they'll put the floor down and they'll begin on the second floor. So we're making good progress. In the hiring process, we are set out invitations for 11 candidates to take the interview, with interviews to start on August 7th and run 7th and 8th, above the schedule right now. Of those 11 candidates, 3 of them are veterans. So to meet our veterans preferences according to the state statute and our local order. For firefighter paramedics, we have 34 applicants. 30 of them have met all the requirements. So we're about where I wanted to be, about double our needs. And but we'll leave it open for till the end of August, I think, and close off at the end of this month and begin the process of sifting through all the applications to get the 15 best candidates. The firefighter drivers, we need 6. We've got 11 candidates right now. Again, we're about double what we need, so we're making good progress there. The direct buying process to reduce our cost of construction. We've done 3 of those purchases as of today. So the process, the workflow is smooth and well honed. We're processing very quickly now. So we've got that under control. And now we're doing a third pay app. So that process also been smoothed out. We're paying within 2 weeks to encourage our subcontractors to keep on the job, interested in the job. So in summary, I think we're moving on time. The project's on time. All the parts are starting to fit into place. We're starting to work well. We have a new superintendent on site, John from Kaufman Lynn. The Nick was temporary. He moved up another project. Our permanent superintendent on site now, and he's been working well with the rest of the team. So I'm encouraged. I'm excited. I think we're in a good place. Any questions?
Sounds good.
Excellent, great report. I hope it continues this way. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
Next item, the Florida Department of Transportation, the R project update.
So again, they're working out some details, mostly a lot of detailed utility work, working with Pat and Sergio in the Public Works Department, getting all those fine details in place. Bringing up any conflicts to us so we can have an opportunity to look at those in the field with them, make any final adjustments, things of that nature. But every indication so far is the project's moving on schedule as they initially anticipated, yet they've not reached out. I'm going to try to pressure them a little bit more here over the next month to figure out where that construction public hearing. Not that I want to hurry them along. I just want it to know what it is. So those folks that are, we're still a couple months out from getting the rest of our family back here from up north. So hopefully we can have that meeting and get the most attendance and things of that nature and get that communicated to everybody. So otherwise the project's, moving on as designed. No major changes have popped up. We have the next agenda item that will come up, which is that contract for their with FDOT to allow them to handle all the utility adjustments for all of our structures. So that's it.
Great. So should we have Pat come up for this
Sure.
next item? So sub item of the
Make 'em
Florida
sweat.
Department of Transportation, the R to approve and authorize an agreement with the state of Florida Department of Transportation in the amount of $126,140 for the paving and expansion of State Road A1A.
All right.
As Marshall mentioned, this we're actually piggybacking off another contractor that is coming through town to raise any manholes or valve vaults that need to be raised during the project.
Because it's not part of, it's something additional that we have to
It's not
do.
part of FDOT's responsibility since it's our utilities. So we have to have it taken out to have all these raised to match everything that's going on.
I have a question
Sure.
on that. Does this go from the line in Del Rey to the line in Boca? What happens
We-
between Del Rey and the bridge?
Yeah,
And
that's who we were actually piggybacking on, the company that is the underground utilities company that starting for Del Rey this way moving forward. So we're all staying with the same contractor. So we were actually piggybacking this off. Somebody already did their due diligence and getting prices for all this.
Right, so Del Rey and Boca will pick up the cost from the bridge to our line, correct?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
that's all. Each individual city takes care of their own utilities. And we may be getting some money back. This is allocated on all the manholes in the right of way. Some might not need to be raised, so we could see some money back from this as well.
And I saw there's a contingency in there too, so, but
Always
I mean, our
contingency.
experience though,
Yes, yes,
contingencies
it's a
lately
must.
hasn't been so good, but,
Mhm.
and then if ends up being more than the 126, are we on the hook
We
for
will be
that
on the
too?
hook for
Okay.
that, but I don't see that. for-
Oh, no. Okay.
I see us getting money back, because like you say, they took the GIS and they counted every manhole in the city
Okay.
that's in the right of way, and not everyone will need to be raised, so I see us getting some money back.
Okay. Any other?
Actually, I note, and that was going to be a question, the $126,140 was the same amount as that exhibit or attachment on page 139 that was the cost to Broward County Water. That was the same amount, and yet that was water valves there were 40, and the manhole lids were 105. And ours are considerably less, 29 and 58 respectively.
And some of that is because they may have to come back. They did it by 1.5, which means they may raise a manhole or a valve vault, and then they may have to come back and make some more adjustments. So that's why they predicated on a 1.5 instead of, now, the Broward thing, I'm not real sure on how they got their figures, but I know ours is predicated on 1.5 per manhole.
Okay, thank you.
Well, if there are no other questions, can we have a motion to approve?
I move that we authorize the mayor to execute an agreement with the state of Florida Department of Transportation in the amount of $126,140 for the paving and expansion of State Road A1A.
I'll second that.
Roll call?
Sure. Commissioner David,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stern,
Yes,
Commissioner Goldberg,
Yes,
Commissioner Peters.
Yeah.
And Mayor Moore.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioner.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
very much. Next item, fiscal year 2023, proposed budget recap update.
So, and I know Dr. Greenwald's here and asked this question specifically. We had a lot of good discussion about healthcare. So we got our bids back. So I'm gonna give a big kudos to Eric and Teresia for wrestling down our Venom. When you hear what I'm about to say, go give them a hug. So the bids came back in and 0 cost increase. And not only that, we're leaving
Fantastic.
Humana for Blue Cross Blue Shield. And the base plan that we're able to offer the employees is of the same quality as the double step buy-up that was from Humana. So not only are we not having an increase in costs, we're getting, I would say, twice the plan coverage through Blue Cross Blue Shield. So this is absolutely amazing news. We had anticipated a 25% cost increase. We came in that I'm going to say 0 for David's budgeting purpose because every employee could make certain selections. So we had a little bit of an uptick, say like 2% on dental and vision, but that's such a small cost on an organization this size. But the healthcare stuff actually is going to be a significantly better plan at, 3 to 5% less, but it all the final dollars will shake out. But so that's really great news. The only cautionary tale I would have is that this could be that they got us in, because they wanted their business next year. We may need to be a little cautious that they might push those back to the double digit increases. But for this year, getting us over into a better program, I did make that discussion with Dr. Greenwald and the FAB that I didn't want to leave the healthcare of employees to chance, especially with the company that's trying to get out of the business. It's not really who you want providing your healthcare to your employees, so we count on. So it was really good that Eric and Teresa were able to work with our broker, squeeze that down. So what does that mean, Marshall, for the bigger picture? Because Dr. Greenwald, I'm going to keep on picking on you, but alluded to, these property values. We could look at a 3 to 400ths of a mil reduction in our tax rate because of this. Now, you could say, what does that mean? Again, we could say a number like we're saving like $130,000 to $150,000 just for the general fund, because you got to remember healthcare provided in water and sewer is picked up by the water and sewer rates. The building is picked up by the building department, those two enterprise funds. But just in the general fund, we're seeing a relatively big number, say $130,000 reduction in healthcare costs. Well, when you take that number and then spread it back into a $30 million budget to the residents, I'm sorry, it only comes out to like 300ths or 400ths of a mil, but it's still a reduction. So we can potentially come away from the budget season reducing the millage rate a bit. We said we were holding it straight, but we could bring it down and still be just no changes, no reduction of service, no structural modifications necessary, just a softening of that millage rate. So I think that's puts us in a really good spot.
Would they entertain a 2-year contract?
With the cap on annual increase.
I know that I think a lot of us were a little jaw dropped by Blue Cross coming in at this. And I think our broker was like, there must have been a misprint because usually Blue Cross is, a little more on the premium side, a little more expensive, but, they were, because Humana asked for, they're offering a renewal, their renewals 8%, 5 to 8%. Blue Cross Blue Shield's a reduction of like 2% from our current rate structure. So it's even a bigger change when you look at what they offered as a renewal versus what Blue Cross as a new provider. So I'm really pleased, no cost increase. This is the second time in 5 years. I don't know how we're doing this. My team's amazing. We're really getting really good stuff here. So I think, David and I were doing some fast penciling this morning together. And I think, 300ths of a mil to 400ths of a mil reduction in the tax rate can occur without really doing anything. So that's kind of a good news.
Well, I think this is a great result, this Blue Cross Blue Shield. I guess, how is the transition? Have they guaranteed that the transition will be smooth?
It is, because we're staying with Rheingold and Associates. Again, I have to say thank you to them as well. They've been really great to work with, and Rate Pass Rheingold, as he calls himself, really did get a rate pass, actually a rate reduction and a better provider. No, it's ties right in. They'll do open enrollment. We use the same systems. All the secondary insurance products are pretty much held in place. So this is really good news. And those that want to do the buy up to the premium, because we have still keeping the 2-tiered system. We had 3 tiers last year. Now we're going to a 2-tier. I haven't seen, to be honest with everybody in there, I haven't seen insurance like this probably since the 90s. This is really good stuff. So, this is pretty amazing.
That's great. And the employees won't have to change their providers. It's a lot of the same.
I don't know any providers that would take Humana that would not take
Okay,
Blue
great.
Cross Blue Shield
Great.
PPO. So, this is really good. I think it's going to help with recruiting into the fire side to know that we have these great, again, the commission and this community's commitment to the employees to make sure quality healthcare is provided. I can't say enough. I think that puts us on the map for retention and recruitment, that here's Highland Beach. Look what we can do for folks. Wildly impressed. I'm around the board. This is great news.
Yeah, so where we are at, we do our preliminary this time of year, right? And the last time we were together, we told the state of Florida, the Department of Revenue, here's our maximum millage, right? And the last time we talked, we had data through April. Okay, so the next time I talk, my staff and I were trying to crunch all of our numbers through the month of July, right? So today's August 1st. We got to get some bank statements in. We got to make sure we reconcile everything, make sure we look for any missing holes, plug those holes for what the numbers should be to give you an idea of where we're going to end this fiscal year, right? But that is great news. We will update our models with that information. We have just some more other expenditures that we estimated in our budget, see where those are coming out. And so the next time we meet, you'll have new numbers, right? And you'll have what we showed you last time, what's changed. And we'll show you those changes and hopefully staff as well as the manager agreed to that we can come back with something a little bit favorable millage rate, but yeah, we'll bring that back to you our next meeting.
And maybe we could also consider saving that money instead of reducing that, because we will be depleting
Yes.
a lot of our fund balance.
Yep.
And, we were just talking about the sewer project, lining project coming up. So I think, perhaps it would also something for us to consider, setting aside some of that balance for the sewer lining project that would be coming up, because it's always helpful to have the money set aside when a project is coming. Especially when our millage rate, I think of the coastal towns, there's only one town less than us. So we're already a low rate.
It's tough to keep up with
Town.
Manalapan.
Yeah, I mean, there is that is, and yeah, but after Manalapan, we are the lowest when you look at Gulfstream. We used to be neck and neck, but I think now we are less than, I guess we'll see what everybody does
Right.
with this year. And I think we can maybe do a comparison once everyone's finalized their rates. But right now, we are the second lowest coastal town millage rate. So
It is phenomenal when you look at the amount of services that are provided.
right, right.
And unique and individual and special to the residents. It's actually unheard of.
And understanding we're establishing an independent fire rescue.
Yeah,
department.
I know.
It's-
We're doing all of this. folks.
Yeah,
We're doing
really,
all
it
of this
really is.
Without, I'm talking cut millage rates. I don't think I would ever say those type of things, but it's a great spot.
But yep. So again,
really
so we're going through those, today's August 1st, and you know what, where staff is dedicated to close out the books. We usually need about 5 to 7 days. We can do it quickly. Get what our estimates are. That's what you want, how things line up. And then update our projections going forward. This is great news because, as we're building our 5-year models, you have to take a lot of assumptions, and insurance, the cost of insurance, the cost of your labor, those things there are sometimes a majority of the cost, and you have to go with some assumptions. And so we'll do that. We'll update the models and we'll come back to you with staff's recommendations and let you see all your options that you have available.
Yeah, and as part of one of those options, I guess I'm requesting that how much could we set aside, like we're doing for I think you're setting aside some money for a fire truck, right?
Yeah,
For the
that was
future?
one of the things. in there.
Can we also perhaps
Fun.
instead of lowering the millage rate, perhaps start setting aside money for the sewer lining project?
Guys are good.
So-
The sinking fund, start stabilizing that
Right.
sinking fund. So, Chief Joseph, hopefully he'll still be with us then, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, one of those trucks are gonna need to be replaced. It'd be sure nice so we don't have to how we're gonna come up with the money. That I've already planned to pay for that. So it's a great position to be in to start really working on the sinking fund.
Because it'd be nice to save that interest expense. Like, I know there's always the option of borrowing money, but then it ends up costing more because of the interest expense. So,
Yep, okay. No, staff will do that. We'll look at all those different scenarios.
Yeah, I think we ought to look at all the options.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
okay, moving along, new business. Consideration of a request for a Town of Highland Beach right-of-way permit for the property at 3805 South Ocean Boulevard.
Good afternoon, for the record, Ingrid Allen, Town Planner. So this is a request for a right-of-way permit, a town right-of-way permit. As mentioned for the property at 3805 South Ocean Boulevard. On page 141 of your packets, I provided you a staff memorandum on this item. I did indicate that on July 13th of 2023, the planning board approved a site plan for this property. The site plan was for a new 3-story, 9,397 square foot, single family residence. This includes a pool and spa as well as a dune walkover. Now, they are coming before you today because we have certain provisions in the code for improvements in the right of way. There are certain improvements that are exempt from a town right of way permit. However, the driveway or swale obviously triggers a town right of way permit. This permit requirement came into place back in December 7th of 2021. The commission adopted an ordinance allowing, certain types, again, right-of-way improvements and also to protect the swales as well. In those particular regulations that were adopted in 2021, there was a regulation specifically in section 25-1 that states that it's unlawful to construct improvements in the public right-of-way, including swales, again, without first obtaining a town right-of-way permit. Also in 2021, the commission adopted a resolution that stated that any of those town right-of-way improvements, if they're along State Road A1A, that the commission wanted to approve those permits. And that will be the case until the RRR project is complete. Once the RRR project is complete, those town right-of-way permits will be approved administratively by staff. So what is they're proposing are, new driveways. There's 3 access points. I've attached to your backup the driveway connection permit that was approved by FDOT. I've gone ahead and referenced the permit number from FDOT again on page 141 of your packets. It's pretty straightforward. I do want to just make a clarification. The actual plans are on page 171 of your packets. There are plans on page 148. These are the paving and drainage plans. The plans on page 148 were the initial plans that the applicant submitted to FDOT. Those plans, you'll see there's a northern driveway. It did not meet the width requirements that we have here in the town code. In our town code, we have a requirement that a driveway has to be at least 25 feet in width if it's single family. So they initially submitted that. They went ahead and revised it in order to be in compliance with the code. And that's the plan that you can see on page 171. You'll see that northern driveway is with that 25-foot width requirement. Just wanted to make that clear. Unfortunately, FDOT in their permit, they don't put like a supersede stamp on the initial plan. So you kind of have to dig through it. So I wanted just to point that out for you. I'll be glad to address any questions.
It's another beautiful investment here. in
I
Highland
know,
Beach.
this project looks amazing, definitely looks amazing. I guess I'll start if no one else wants to start. So it has all the swales that are needed. It complies with all the right of way.
Correct.
It's already been through all the prior
That's correct.
reviews.
This paving and drainage plan was also reviewed by the town's drainage consultant, which we consult out to CAP government. So this was reviewed by a drainage engineer. The drainage calculations were all provided as part of the site plan approval. So that same paving and drainage plan that was approved by the planning board was the same plan that was submitted to FDOT, which again, they signed off on that. So they're on board.
And what I remember as one of the reasons that the commission was to review these things was to make sure that the property owners were aware of the RRR project that was coming up and how it perhaps might impact them. I think at the time it was like we wanted to doubly make sure that the property owner was aware of anything that could, possibly happen. And so obviously they are aware of the RRR project coming up.
Yes, the property owners have hired provided an authorized agent. All of this the authorized agent has been made aware of all these things in the initial development review process for that site plan approval. This is all brought to their.
Will the timing of the development of this project be at the same time as do you know when they'll begin?
Well,
construct-
according to the code, once they receive planning board approval, they need to initiate construction within 2 years. So that will be up to the property owner. They have 2 years to initiate.
My guess is they won't be making any of the right of way improvements until post-construction and probably do those very at the end, because it's brick pavers and there's 3 entry
Right.
points off. That'd be quite expensive to put those down to rip them all back out. So they'll probably delay on that part.
That
of it.
Do you think it's
sense.
likely they'll start that after the
Yeah.
triple
I mean,
R?
they'll start construction now or relatively soon. I just don't
Mm.
think they'll make any right of way improvements until FDOT's at least through that zone. So they can, rest assured they're not putting in something to be ripped out.
Right. And I'm sure
And they're aware of the timing of,
yeah, I mean, once they get the approval from the commission on the town right of way permit and that amendment to that landscape maintenance agreement, then they sit down with the building official, and they go through all the construction requirements, and all of this will be brought to their attention as far as the nuance on construction during the building permit process.
great.
Ingrid, there's no swales on that now. The property doesn't look like it has any right now.
I'd have to check the survey. No, I'm looking at the authorized agent.
Okay, yeah, because I know I passed by this. I don't realize anything, so it's a
Yeah.
good thing that they're gonna
Yes.
put the swales in.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Very good, complete. Thank you.
Do we need a motion to approve this?
We need allow public comments. 3 minutes.
Any public comments? Okay, hearing no public comments. May we have a motion, please?
I move that we permit the right-of-way permit for 3805 South Ocean Boulevard for their improvements.
Second,
Do a roll call?
And you can do it all in favor.
Okay, all in favor?
yes,
Aye.
aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item, resolution number 2023-016, a resolution of the Town Commission of Highland Beach authorizing the mayor to execute amendment number 6 to the State of Florida Department of Transportation, District 4, Landscape Inclusive Memorandum of Agreement on behalf of Town of Highland Beach and providing for an effective date.
Okay, so this item is the same property as the previous item, 3805 South Ocean Boulevard. So there was an agreement between FDOT and the town of Highland Beach back in 2017. This is specifically for landscape inclusive maintenance memorandum of agreement. This is for maintaining landscaping in the right of way. Anytime a property owner wants to place new landscaping in FDOT's right of way, you trigger an amendment to this 2017 agreement. So I've gone ahead and provided you on page 176 of your packets, a table which shows the previous 5 amendments. This is what is before you is number 6. We do have a regulation in our code, even though this particular landscape inclusive maintenance agreement is specifically between FDOT and the town of Highland Beach. We do have a provision in our code, section 2810A, which says that the property owner has to maintain any landscaping that is in the abutting right of way. So just want to make that clear to you as well. I've gone ahead and provided you again, the permit number from FDOT. Obviously, FDOT has signed off on that landscaping that's in the right of way. When the planning board gave them site plan approval, a component of the site plan approval is a landscape plan. The code requires when you're coming in for a site plan approval, you have to have a landscape plan. So not only is a property owner proposing landscaping on their property, again, they're also proposing it on the right of way, and FDOT has signed off on it. I did make a note on page 177 of your packets that there is a black olive tree in the right of way. That black olive tree in our code is considered a specimen tree. And per our code, specimen trees typically have to get approval for the town, from the town commission to have them removed. However, there is an exception, and I provided the provision in our code about hazardous trees. If it's deemed or if a tree is designated hazardous, regardless if it's a specimen tree or a historic tree, you can remove it without any permit. I did note that FDOT, again, the trees in their right of way, they have deemed it hazardous. I have correspondence in your packet from FDOT agreeing to that. So I just want to put that out there. I'll be glad to address any questions that you might have.
Well, I just have an observation in reading it over in preparation for today. I was taken with, I said to myself, well, this is why we have such a beautiful corridor here. It is so impressive, the corridor, just
Oh,
driving
yes.
down A1A, how beautiful it is. And I was taken with that we specifically talk about the adjacent landscaping and what the homeowner's responsibility is. So it's very well drawn. Thank you.
Thank you. No. Okay. Can we have a motion, please?
I move that we accept resolution number 2023-016.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Okay, moving on to resolution number 2023-017, a resolution of the Town Commission of Highland Beach approving a declaration of unity of title submitted by Gunther Berman and Margarita Berman for the properties located at 4015 South Ocean and 4019 South Ocean and providing for an effective date.
Okay, so here we have a request again for unity of title for the two properties, 4015 and 4019. I provided some aerials of the property on pages 254 through 256. You could see, you know, the property looking down from the front, from the rear. We do have a code provision, section 30-68Q3, which states that all unities of title applicable to property within the town shall be approved by the town commission. I provided, again, on page 244 of your package, just some zoning information and the corresponding future land use designation for the parcels. Both of the parcels are zoned residential single family. They both have a corresponding future land use designation of single family. And then I provided you a table which shows the adjacent properties. So the properties to the north of these two parcels have, again, the same zoning district, residential single family, same corresponding future land use designation, single family. And then across the street on the west side, you'll see the residential multifamily low density, both in zoning and in future land use. Just a little bit of, I mean, if you looked at the aerials, you could see that 4015 is currently vacant, and 4019 currently has a 3-story single family home. According to the Palm Beach County property appraiser, the home was built in 1994. And there is a survey that's also included in your packet, and the combination of those two parcels will come out to 40,176 square feet. I did make a note on page 245 of your agenda memorandum that any type of redevelopment of that existing home or any major modification that the applicant wishes to do in the future, you approve the unity of title. Obviously, they'll have to submit a development application to the building department. Whatever they do, it has to be in compliance with the town code, including but not limited to the land development regulations. Those are the setbacks, the height, and lot width requirements, as well as their permitted uses. There is no conceptual plan at this time that the applicant has submitted. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I have one quick question. By allowing them to unify this property, does that mean that they can only have one primary residence for both of the properties,
Right.
not two separate ones?
Well, I didn't do the density calculation, but let's see. I'll have a calculator in front of me. But whatever, I think the intent is really just to have the one single family home. I think if they can get more density, then you may have to consider platting the property if you want more than that. I haven't done the density calculation.
No, but it makes sense that it's now going to be considered one lot.
It's one lot, should have one principal structure.
So therefore, single family home, it's gonna have
Right.
one single family. home.
Right, and the RS zoning district only allows single family detached homes. In that particular zoning district, you can't do an attached home, it has to be a detached home. So
And can you think of any reason why we shouldn't do this?
I don't see why not. There's been other unity of titles here in the town. You have 4206 on Bellito. You also have another property in Burlito. I can't remember the address, the Birch property. They also unified their property. Right across the street, you have the property that has unified. They put a driveway, so.
I'm not suggesting that I'm against this because I think it makes perfect sense, but just I wanted, from your perspective, I wanted to know if there was any downside. 'cause
From
I
a
don't
planning
see one.
perspective, I don't see it. I did discuss it, and I know that Len Rubin also reviewed it, the request, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm in favor. I think what a lovely property that will be, almost an acre on the ocean. Any other comments? Okay. another motion.
I move that we approve.
Oh.
Oh,
Are there any public comments on this?
We have the authorized agent for the property owner, the attorney. I don't know, Christy Armada, if you want to just add anything to the record. I'm here to talk to you about this. I know it's probably,
I understand if you're curious why there isn't a proposed plan. We did when we started this process a few years ago, a couple of years ago now.
So if you don't mind just stating your name and.
Sorry,
That's okay.
yes, Christy Armada from the law firm of Olive Judd on behalf of the property owners. We had a conceptualized plan a couple of years ago, but since time has passed, they have changed their mind and they don't want to move forward with that plan. They've decided to just pause and collect themselves. But the idea is, they have no intent but to build a single family home on this property. No other development plan. They just want to rebuild their home.
So tear down the current
Tear
home
down-
and then,
At the beginning of this, they had questions and we reached out to the building department because they wanted to do phased construction, still living in their home while they began the construction of the new home and kind of attached midway. We spoke with the building department and that was a terrible idea. So we've scratched that. They're starting with new plans. They just haven't finalized what they want to do yet.
lovely. I think it'll be magnificent once it's
Mhm.
finished.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming.
I move we approve resolution number 2023-017.
Seconded.
And I guess I was thinking we do a roll call since this is impacting
Sure.
property.
Commissioner David,
Yes.
Commissioner Goldberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Peters,
Yeah.
Vice Mayor Stern,
Yes.
and Mayor Moore.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, item D, clarification of section 106-113 Florida statutes regarding educational campaign for upcoming referendum questions.
Well,
Town
luckily,
attorney.
we don't have any right now, so there's a lot you can do. But if you ever get to the point where it looks like there's gonna be a referendum, then all these restrictions kick in. So I previously provided a memo at the beginning of this year. This is an update because Marshall has some specific questions like the manager's minute. And it all comes back to that key of, is there a referendum issue coming up? And there's no guidance as to when that magic moment is. To us, when you have an item on an agenda for first reading, that is pretty clear. That's that moment. Might it be a meeting before that where you're discussing putting it on? Perhaps, but the closer you get to an agenda item where you're actually saying, we are going to consider voting to put on X on a referendum, the more conservative approach would be that's when you stop any communication because there are restrictions and some prohibitions on what you can do. So right now, for example, if the management minute wanted to talk about the beautiful sea turtles, you can talk about sea turtles. Whether you're going to have a referendum on sea turtles is not even being discussed at this point. So you can talk about sea turtles. But if you start having conversations, say, we want to do a referendum because we want to establish a sea turtle sanctuary somewhere in town, then you would have to stop communicating with the public using public dollars.
Question. Let me give you an example. Maybe you can comment on it. The Financial Advisory Board, after we decided that we want to talk about raising the limit of expenditures, the cap, the Financial Advisory Board recommends that we raise the cap. Now, could they be quoted in the manager minute because it's something coming from a third party?
I'm not so sure it's important it's coming from a third party, but at
Well,
this point,
maybe.
this group, this body has not decided that. You've not made any effort to adopt that recommendation. You've not made any effort to put that on a ballot. So I think certainly the manager can say, you're all aware, we've considered in the past, Financial Advisory Board has studied it. Here's the Financial Advisory Board's report, summary of their report, something. So they do know what their peers are thinking about that. So yes, that would be fine at this point, because there's, as far as I know, there's no mention about a referendum right now. Now, make believe, fast forward, let's say 3 months from now, you start talking about, we may want to put something on the whatever ballots coming up. Then at that point, you probably start needing to be more cautious, but you can start disseminating information about that type of an issue. And that's been an issue obviously for years, but just because an issue doesn't mean it's always a referendum. It's just giving education, information, factual information, and through, for example, the manager's minute.
So along those lines, like piggybacking on that, so let's say we had a project that was 500,000, I don't know, 700,000. And let's say the manager's minutes said, we have this project, but we're going to have to put it off because we, I don't know, laying down some groundwork of how not being able to move forward with a project because of a referendum.
You could say,
And-
for example, we need to buy new tables for the library, right? And it's going to cost us $500,000 to buy those tables, but we don't have the funds to do that. That's all factual information. The library needs tables. They're going to cost about this much money. We don't have the money to do that. That is fine. Now, let's make believe again, at some point you say, let's talk about going to the voters to authorize buying new tables for the library. You're getting down that slippery slope. And then you say, Mr. Attorney, draft an ordinance to put that on the ballot. Okay, now you're slipping and sliding now on that slope. So at this point, it's just information, educating people about what the needs are and any of the needs of the community, whatever the needs are. Again, I use Sea Turtle as an example. That's kind of a benign example, but you can use a more specific example. This is what the town needs. And then there's always the public discussion. So for example, Marshall talked about the millage rate could technically even be reduced a teeny little bit. Well, there may be citizens that say, you know what, raise the millage rate a mill. If a person moves forward, I'm going to be surprised, but there may be there's that marketplace of ideas where the people can discuss and talk about, okay, we need to do this project. We need these library tables. What will we do? Maybe we'll have an ice cream social and raise money for the whatever the different options are. But you can put that out there that here's the need. We don't have the money to do it. And then people can talk about what the options are. Maybe somebody can put a brilliant idea and you go down that path. Maybe there's a grant out there. But at the end of the day, maybe the only real option is to go to referendum, whether it's to raise the cap or whether it's to specifically authorize that one project, kind of like you did for fire, right? You went out there and you said to people, we're going to spend $10 million. And the people overwhelmingly supported that because you had communicated the need.
And maybe another example is the canvassing board. It's part of our charter that members of the commission serve on the canvassing board. And we're finding that it's, quite onerous for us to do that. And now that a couple of us have been participating on the canvassing board and the new requirements imposed by the supervisor of elections, perhaps we think it's time to transition the responsibility of the canvassing board to the county canvassing board. And in order to do that would be a charter change. It is.
Yeah.
It is okay.
So
So you could
I don't know what people think about that. And I imagine a lot of people don't, I know I didn't fully comprehend what this all entailed until I started to get involved with it. And then now, and I've seen other towns who it's not part of their charter. They had an easier transition to the county. They have implemented that change. So, I want us to have a successful referendum. So, I'd like to start getting people on board with that. So what would, I guess I'm thinking, what's the best way
Well,
to have
factual-
success?
Again, giving factual information. Our town is one of the few, and you may want to give statistics. There are 39 cities in Palm Beach County, only 3. I'm making up that number, but it's not many, 2.
Right.
Pretty
It is
close,
very
I might
few.
guess, that require us to serve, and it is. It just doesn't make sense realistically that you're having officials schlep up to Riviera Beach to do what, really? I mean, you've both done it. I've done it. So anybody that's done it knows that it's unfortunately a real waste of time. And there's not much meaningful input that you have. And I shouldn't be saying that, but it's the truth.
Right.
And anybody that's lived through it knows that that's the case. And you can start giving out facts like that. And then when the time comes, the unfortunate part is that information will probably be out there several months before it ever gets on the ballot.
Question I have is the mayor just tipped her cap. Is it now off limits?
I don't think she's tipped the cap about going.
I think I kind of get an idea of what she's
That
thinking.
This is the future this is
It's-
possibly a future referendum. Have I now just,
Just a possibility.
sorry. but
I want to look at that.
That's what I'm saying. It's a great example.
Right,
And
I
it's-
wanna-
again, I would say it's almost a benign conversation. A lot of people in the community probably don't get upset about it.
right.
But have we now commenced the interest for a charter revision that requires a referendum? Have we done that? So now we can no longer, with our dollars, communicate out to the public? Or do we have to actually trigger past that ordinance? And then it's just discussion until they say yay.
It's a great question because there's no guidance out there. We're all using our best common sense guidance as to, I don't think this conversation right now, we're talking about examples, triggers it. But you have a good point. There could be someone that says, oh, that triggered it. That you're not taking a vote, you're not taking a position, you're not directing anybody to do anything on it yet. You're having a conversation about different examples. But Marshall has a very good point. When do you get on that slope? When do you get there? So you have to have some kind of conversation. David's comment about the Financial Advisory Board is that's a factual thing. You're talking factually what it's like to do this. And there's no referendum in the foreseeable future. I mean, I'm not even sure when the next possible ballot would be right. It's
Yeah.
6 months away.
So I
So
think I thought what we were thinking of doing is over the next few months, be thinking about what would go on the referendum because it would be due,
I'm afraid.
I know, right?
right.
Because I thought it was due beginning of December. So I thought, almost time was of the essence here that we have to really
Yeah, I
start
would
putting our
think
heads together.
you start putting out factual information about things that need the public to know about. But then at some point, relatively soon, it sounds like there may start being some agenda items where you're saying we're going to have a conversation about X, Y, and Z. Once you start having those, you're getting closer and closer to triggering this prohibition.
Really, until we instruct you to draft an ordinance for referendum question, have we really made a commitment to do it or just explore it? Because there's a couple that have been kind of expressed. We have a sewer project. Dr. Greenwald got to that a little bit. There was a good conversation. That takes, to get an SRF loan takes 18 months. So getting it talked about, or at least general voter approval to go forward, not a bad idea because it's going to take another year and a half after that before we can even do anything. The canvassing board. The vice mayor has talked about the question on funding limits again and continued that conversation. So we have not triggered it until what point,
I mean, there's the legal issue, which is very unsettled, very gray, right? When is that trigger? They didn't put, it would have been nice if they would have put in the law. The trigger is when you're running as a candidate, qualifying. Once you qualify, and now all these rules kick in. There isn't this bright line that the legislature gave us. They just gave you this fuzzy, once it's going to be subject to a vote of the electors. What does that mean? So again, I'm interpreting it to mean certainly no later than when you're considering an ordinance to put it on. Could it be considered earlier? Let me step back from legal for a second and go with my political science degree from 40-something years ago. Remember the last election, there was a lot of pushback from folks on a lot of reasons, but one reason was you shouldn't be telling us what to do. You shouldn't be spending taxpayer money. And it was just before this bill got passed. So there's always a segment of the population that no matter how factual you are, no matter how low key you are, they feel that that's apparently what the legislature feels too. It's not the role of government to get into that. Now, again, I scratch my head because I remember writing brief years ago that said it's not only the responsibility, but the duty of a government to educate the electorate. And that was the law for years. And I won those cases years ago about reference, the healthcare district, the children's service council. They all passed through efforts that were major education campaigns, inserts in the paper before social media.
Right.
And that was allowable then because it was factual, but the water's changed. The atmosphere has changed, and now you got to be much more careful from, if we had the kind of educational effort we did, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the healthcare district and the trauma system and all that, we wouldn't have that, probably not, because the county spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and we did multiple public speaking engagements all over. That was okay then, not now.
Counselor, could we potentially, or is it advisable for us to take some type of action to define when we think that line has been crossed? Because our charter only is going to pressure us more in the future with the spending limit to have more referendum questions. And we have a hard time until we, I find in the community in the last 5 years, until we say we pass that ordinance, no one really comes out to talk to us, or we can't get that commitment from folks on, do you like it? Do you not? Until we say we're putting it on, and then we get the blowback. What point can we, say, once we do first read, schedule first read is the trigger date for us. We kind of set the standard, not that we want to, but we're gonna have a lot, I won't say a lot. We will have referendum questions continually over the next 5 years just because of funding capital projects. And
So-
especially if they don't pass the first time and things are breaking, we probably want to add a couple of times.
You must have been a fly on the wall or talking to Jen in our office, because just last week, we had that conversation and we had it on that topic, and also the whole financial part of the charter that says that the cap is 350. Do we try to further define when that says, it talks about things like urgent emergency needs, and do we want to try to further define that? I mean, we both shied away from that, thinking, every time, that's a third rail topic. Every time you start talking about it, people get excited about it. So, but your conversation is the same conversation literally last week that we were having internally about what can we suggest to you all? Do we ask you to consider an ordinance that puts some guardrails out there? Back to political concern, not as much, a little bit legal, but are you stirring the hornet's nest then? Just by even going down the path of trying to define what the charter language means. I'm not recommending it, but just like Marshall, we're exploring and having kind of an intellectual conversation about where do you go? How do you help town move forward? Because let's face it, we all know that we're living, in the year 2023 with a restriction that's 40 years or more old, and this doesn't really apply. Or is not workable. I shouldn't say it doesn't apply. It does apply, but it's not workable.
So it's saying we can't spend money to communicate anything about, there can't be any public expenditures about,
Right.
but we can talk about it at meetings, right? Does that?
You can, certainly, you can talk about it at meetings and the public can talk about it.
Can we go to the condos? Because I know that Mayor Hillman and I spent a lot of time hitting the pavement, if you will. And also asked other commissioners to, if somebody, go to their building, talk about it. Can we do that? Is that an expenditure? Because they are paid. You do get a stipend, not much, but a stipend, if you're gonna go out there, does that trigger, so we can't even go out and talk to folks, which is like the true grassroots of, community organizing of ideas and.
Again, I'm actually going to memo I did to Mayor Hillman last year where we were talking about what can you do? And I don't think we addressed that topic, but I still tend to go out there a little bit and say, there is an obligation as an elected official to educate the folks on factual information. And you're not spending money because you're not putting it in the paper, you're not
Being
going on social
invited.
media. Right, if you're at a community event, you're at a condo and you're talking about facts, don't advocate. You can't say, please vote for this or please vote for that. I wouldn't suggest you do that. Now, as private citizens, you could put up a sign on your own yard or, but when you're in your official capacity, you're going to a condo as the mayor or the vice mayor or commissioner or the city manager, you're providing facts. We need these tables for the library and here's why, they are dry rot in them, there's termites, and whatever the reasons are. And you'll know I'm using a ridiculous example just to illustrate that. So I still think it's a good thing, allowable legally. But I've already given the disclaimer 10 times, this is a gray area. There's not a bright line test on any of this. But more important, I think, is you have to gauge the community and is the blowback from whatever you do worth the education? And how do you, that's as gray of an area as the law part of it.
Counselor, could we state the facts at the open meetings, have the people discuss it, then hope the press reports it? Can we send out press releases to all the avenues? No, can't do that about the facts?
Yeah, I wouldn't do press releases, but you're discussing it right now. People are hearing it right now. You're getting your word out right now. You have to have conversations in a public meeting. So public meeting conversations are fine.
And I imagine partnering with a political action committee and having the political action committee.
Well, partnering is a bad word. Now,
Or-
political
or
action
what we-
committee on their own forms, and they decide that they want to support the town without any connection with the town. We're not funding it. We're not endorsing it. We're not doing anything with it other than Joe Citizen says, this is a great idea. I want to improve the tables in the library and I'm going to go out there and form a pack. That's fine. That would be wonderful if anybody's listening. If you want to do that, that's great.
But it would not be fine if one of us were to reach out to the political action committee. That would not be.
Yeah, then you're right in that quagmire, in that gray area. Yeah. Think of it from the mindset of the folks that wrote this law. You're thinking in the mindset of properly elected, duly serving people who care about your community and you want to improve your community. I hate to say it, I don't think that was the mindset of the folks that wrote this. Their mindset was very different. It's how do we reign? And look, we see this all over. How do we reign in government? Or how do we reign in local government and give more power to a state agency, a state government, whether it's a governor or a legislature, the whole erosion of home rule over the last 10 years. This to me is just another brick in that building that's being built. And you all were at the, 4 of you were at the discussion about Form 6, and I'll be presenting on it in 2 weeks here. That's to me is one more effort to let's weaken local government. Let's have people not run for office. Let's put another reason out there why people wouldn't want to run for their local office. Why do we need all these cities? Why do we need these local elected officials? I hear that echoing in my head. I don't know if you hear that, but when I read these laws, that's what I keep hearing again and again.
I think we would be particularly vulnerable being a small town, that somebody would gobble us.
Again, we were all at the same place and we all heard the same comments, both from the presenter and the other communities, whether it was the Jupiter Inlet Colony or the Ocean Ridge, the Manalapan, the coastal communities, smaller communities. That's an easier target to have those communities. And I can't believe I would even say this, disband, be annexed into the next, or be annexed and into the county, be part of the county. All the communities, Highland Beach obviously is at the top of that list. We were formed years ago because people wanted to have a certain lifestyle. They wanted to have a certain community. This community is very different than the community right next door to you, Delray Beach, right? You established Highland Beach, the identity of Highland Beach, its own place, its own sense of place. So is Ocean Ridge, so is Gulfstream. And I'm just stunned that you have a government that's saying, let's kind of get away with all that. Let's get more, everything's gonna be vanilla. One size fits all. We're not gonna have individual cities that reflect their communities. Belle Glade is very different than Highland Beach.
I have a question. If we were to discuss items, say of systems that had to be repaired or improved, and that in order to do so, we had to use one of the exceptions of emergency purposes. And if we illuminated that, would that be too close to the issue?
Well, again, you're talking about providing factual information as to why there's a need, right? Is that,
Yeah, that an expense was made over the limit by the use of one of the exceptions, one of permissible emergency things.
yeah, I
Just
mean,
by listing that, those items and services where the government was able to make that expense, but with a different authorization. I'm limiting what I'm even saying now. Because I don't want to violate, any line in the sand. here. But if it was brought out in that fashion, without advocating, just as an informational purpose, to illuminate for us in the discussion. Do I have to go further with this? Is that permissible?
well, let me kind of go back and just read with it, because I think it is, if it's this public forum, because it does say this subsection, everything that said no advocating, does not preclude a local government or person from reporting on official actions, right, actions that you take of the governing body in an accurate, fair, and impartial manner. Now, again, those words accurate, fair, and impartial are powder keg words in the legal world, but I think we get the general sense of if you're accurately, fairly reporting what occurred, posting factual information on the government website or printed material. It's okay. Posting and providing information for a public forum, by people, and that's okay. Providing factual information in response to an inquiry. So you're allowed to do all of that, but you can't advocate and you can't send it out to the electors. You can't email out, you can't hand out, you can't in any way disseminate it. We had a long discussion about social media. Are you sending it out then if it's in social media? Or you're just posting it? And again, we came down on the more conservative side and we didn't really reach that question. It was really more decided on, well, it's not one of the exceptions. It talks about these are things you can do. Everything, you have this broad prohibition, but you can do these things. It doesn't say and social media. So.
But from a logical perspective, we're not going to put something up for a referendum that we don't believe in. So anything that goes to a referendum it's not being impartial. It's advocating for the referendum. Well, you don't do it. So how do you, I don't understand how
Yeah,
you can get
it's-
around
it's-
that.
It does seem like a catch-22, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think your only real option is to do your job, determine what's in the best interest of the community, educate the people as best you can, have as many of these kind of public conversations, public forums, invite the public in, and then put it up for a vote.
But there's nothing wrong with the Coastal Star reporting all this information.
Rich can write all day
anything he
long,
wants.
because he's reporting what's occurring
Gotta be
here.
nice to it.
Be nice to Rich.
To a certain extent.
No.
And any resident can also promote it on
Yes.
their own.
Yes.
It's just, we can't.
Right, residents can
initiate, right.
We
certainly.
can't send a brochure we sent with the questions or
Right.
the direct letters from each
Right.
commissioner saying why we made this decision. We never advocated
No, you never.
in anything we've done here. Just here's why we're going down here. Whether or not they liked it, at least we explained why.
The why would be a factual statement as opposed to advocating.
Say that one more
No.
time.
We want to do this because.
Well, again, you're saying we need new tables. That's why, that's the because the cost is this. You're putting out facts. You're not saying, please vote to do this. You're not again, going back many years ago to my healthcare district, they used to do a lot of this in the eighties and nineties. We had those brochures, even then, they said vote, and you say vote yes. The first draft said vote yes, crossed out the yes. I said, that's tipping too far. But we put out factual information. Trauma will save lives. That's the facts. How many people are alive in this county because we have a trauma helicopter? It's gonna cost you some money. That was a fact. Vote. I say we got away with it, but we got away. We got sued. We got sued. I mean, we went to court and, you know, and the appeals court agreed with us that we hadn't crossed the line. My worry is this changes the line a lot from where it was in 1987, 1989, 1991, when all of that was going on.
Now, what if a commission member is running for reelection? Can they advocate in their capacity in an election?
Say yes, and I'm gonna ask you three to help me out.
I think you could, your platform could be, I support this. You're not advocating for it. Now, if someone's going to argue you're impliedly advocating for, but you still have your First Amendment rights. You're not you're not a commissioner at that point. You're a candidate. You're a candidate for office. You happen to be a sitting commissioner, and your platform is, I believe we need tables for the library, or I support the referendum issue on tables for the library, or I oppose it. Yeah, somebody might vote no and oppose it. Your candidate opposing you may be opposing that issue. We all know that will be a flashpoint of any election.
Do you think that you need a disclaimer in order to cover,
Well, certainly,
cross the Ts and dot the Is on that?
certainly in any material you put out from your PAC, if you're putting out material that says, vote for me, here's the reasons why, because I'm a great human being and I have fiscal responsibility and I support this issue. You darn well better have your political disclaimer on there because you're doing it as a candidate, not as a.
Oh, I meant actually in addition to that.
No, I think that
Point.
disclaimer is going to be enough. But in
That'll
all
be
these
enough.
questions you're asking,
Mhm.
we're going to all be answering together, because somewhere in the state is going to file a lawsuit and we're going to get some guidance from some court at some place. I don't want us to be that guidance.
You're right.
I love it. As you all know, I love court. I love to be doing this, but it's not where I want you to be. I try to keep you out of court.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and if you're running, if you are a commissioner, you're running, you're still a commissioner at that point, you send that literature.
But you are sending out your literature as a candidate
As a
then.
candidate.
You're not using public
So it's
dollars.
my Support.
You're sending as candidate. Again, no guidance on this, but it's just logical, right? You have
Yeah.
all these campaign finance laws that govern what you can and can't do as a candidate. So I think you're okay there. I wish I could really give you bright lines. I wish as a lawyer, that's what we want to do. But I think we're all having the same kind of conversation. We're all realizing there's things we can do and there's lines we can't cross, and just let's not get too close to that line we can't cross. And that's only a preview, because next week, Form 6, or next meeting, Form 6, that'll be even a better conversation. Anything else,
Any-
Madam Mayor, on that?
I don't know, any public comments on this? No, I think that's it. Thank you very much for your
Thank-
reports.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, next item, consideration of proposed amendment number 5 to tower siting lease agreement between the town of Highland Beach and Sprint T-Mobile.
Good afternoon, Teresa Cuevas, Town Manager's Office. The item before you today is a proposed amendment to the lease agreement between the town and Sprint, which has now been acquired by T-Mobile. As a bit of history, the town has been in agreement with Sprint for the past 25 years. The original agreement was signed in 98 for the installation of the mobile antennas on the town's water storage tank. Over the years, the agreement has been modified based on term agreements of the term extensions of the agreements, rent increases, modifications to the site. There's been a 3% annual increase that's put into the agreement, as well as Sprint being responsible for paying for the electricity that they use for powering the equipment. So the amendment before you today proposes a couple of additional terms. The first being, the lease would automatically extend for 5 additional and successive 5-year terms, therefore 25 years agreement. So that's why it's before you today, because it's a long-term agreement. When reviewed by the town attorney, the question was proposed was, do we want to extend it for 25 years? Or do we maybe want to cut that down to 3 or 4 5-year renewals? The second term, our rent currently that Sprint pays the town monthly is $3,718 per month. The town manager's office was able to negotiate an increase in our rent to $4,783.62. And that should be noted that in our original proposal, they didn't have any rent increase at all. They just wanted to give us a baseline. There's also an annual increase that will increase the rent by a 3% escalation every year, starting December 14th, 2024. And also, if the town requires the equipment to be moved, the amendment provides a provision that the town must pay for the building permit fees. And the town attorney wanted us to clarify if we wanted Sprint to pick up the cost for that. So right now, if Sprint makes any modifications to the site, they're responsible for building permit fees and making sure they take it through the process. If the town requires any of the equipment to be relocated, the proposal says the town will pay for those permit fees. So I'm just looking for a little bit of direction and guidance from the commission on how we want to move forward on the proposal.
It's a two-edged sword when you're wondering about whether you want 3 5-year extensions or 5. Because if you do 3 and prices go up, then you can negotiate a higher rate. And then you can negotiate for the following 10 years or 15 years, a higher rate. But if if prices on things go down, then when you renegotiate, you're going to wind up going down. So I don't know, it's kind of flipping a coin for me.
I'll give you an opinion on this. If we didn't have 3% annual increase, I'd be inclined to have the shorter agreement. With the guaranteed 3% over a long period of time, I think we'll come out better by getting that increase.
Keeping it the 25 years.
Yeah, so how was the 4783 determined? So it was about a 30% increase, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, how did that come about?
So I looked into the town of Hillsborough Beach, was similarly situated to us, and their rent is $2,650 per month, and that agreement was signed in 2018. So then I also went to the city of Boca Raton. Their agreement is a little bit different because they actually sold a full piece of property to Sprint, and they have subleases, and they were getting about $20,000 or 40% of the gross income received from the leases. So Marshall and myself, we picked a number and we actually got up to 6,000. We're just throwing it out there. And then
And
Sprint,
how did you, as a percentage of the money that they're making, is that how you came up with the 47?
No, we just took a bigger number. We wanted a bigger number.
That was it.
There wasn't a lot of strategy. We just looked. So Tricia did the research and said, here's kind of the shooting gallery. Here are the targets. We took a big target knowing that they're probably not going to want it because we said 6,000 and you pay for all of our phones. And they said no to that. And then they came back with the 47 and some change. And they said that's as far as whoever their sub consultant is. Now we're not talking to T-Mobile. It's a contractor that does it for T-Mobile.
So there's already been some negotiation.
Yeah, we've been working on that based on, Tricia's research and talking to them like, hey, that's not going to work. You can't keep it the same. Why would I do it?
Yeah, I know. That seemed, I wasn't sure
The only thing
what's the market rate. for
Yeah, the
this.
only thing I would caution is we do use T-Mobile. We have terrible cell service at points in this town. Probably don't want to push them to pull it down. If you want to, that's fine. I'll tell them to leave. That's not a problem. It's just, we do have a lot of customers in the area that it's nice to have that signal sent from the center of town on that elevated storage tank. Even though we lose a lot of signal going out in the ocean, at least we got some signal coming north and south off of it. So it does help a little bit with some folks that have the cell service.
Yeah, and I was wondering about the 3% increase. I mean, obviously that's low compared to the most recent years. I mean, that definitely struck me as low. I mean, I guess I didn't know what did the negotiations go like for that 3% increase? I mean, I guess I would have hoped for more than a 3% annual
We kind of
increase.
stayed on target for what we've seen in the past. The previous agreements were about 3%. But if you give me direction to go back and ask for a little bit more, I'd be willing
Because
to do that.
that's why we had the 30% increase for this rent is to make up for the lower than average escalate. Do you recall what was the escalation percentage in the prior agreement?
It was 3%.
It was
It's our
3.
current, it's 3. So it's been 3 over time, though the rent is probably, as Vice Mayor Stern saying, you probably have done okay or a little bit better because it's, there's years where we had 0
Mhm.
inflation rate, 0%, CPI, and we're getting 3.
But this is on a much higher base. So that 3% dollar wise.
Be
Right.
a little bit bigger. No.
Yeah, 'cause we
What's
did the jump up.
the cancellation policy?
Right now, I believe it's a 30-day notice on both ends.
Okay, so if at some point a different company came and said, hey, we'll pay you double to put our tower up there, then if we give 30 days notice, we can cancel it.
And one thing I have learned is that the site has been upgraded and now the equipment that is out there can accommodate other cell providers. So if the commission would be inclined to entertain those conversations, I definitely will reach out to other providers if we want to go down that route.
I will work. My only caveat with that is I don't want to work through 3rd and 4th and 5th party vendors that basically kind of group other. I'd rather have the commission work with each. So T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T versus, a
Yes.
secondary company that kind of takes a scratch. We should be direct with that
Yeah,
infrastructure.
I agree. I had experience with that and we wound up not letting them put
Yeah.
a tower on our roof because it just made no sense financially for us to do it. And this agent, we would have no say. We wouldn't be able to say no. They would decide who was going to do it, what kind of equipment. And I said, I don't care what you're paying us. I'm not going there.
They usually want you to sign these really long-term, that one that contacted us.
100 years.
Wanted 100-year this, I'm like, I'm not relinquishing rights for 100 years. There's no possible way. That I couldn't think of a commissioner that would want to do that unless they own the company, but.
Well, if the cancellation terms are without cause, 30 days you're out. I guess the length really wouldn't matter, either one of us.
Good point.
The 3% doesn't track with inflation,
Current inflation,
current inflation. So
which you don't
perhaps
know
we
it's going to be in the
should look at
future.
look at maybe, reasonable in the last decade, but that's a concern. A 25-year period always seems so extraordinary to me. However, if there's such an easy out for everyone here, then anyone could bail out if the rates go up or down, or the term is too onerous.
I guess if we canceled though, we would have to pay for taking all the equipment down from the water tower, I guess.
Oh,
I don't know. If we have that. I don't
oh,
know if there'd be a charge incurred for that. We just
Yeah.
tell them to take down their equipment by a certain date.
But I wouldn't support, I would support that the cell provider bear the cost of relocating the equipment.
well, if I sincerely doubt that they would want to leave it there if we are not going to be using them anymore. We say our contract is over. I doubt that they're going to leave that equipment up
Well,
there.
would there be any other circumstance other than you're out? No, would is it foreseeable that we would need the ability to relocate?
If, only thing I can think of is if, because it's on the elevated tank, so if we had some structural integrity issues. And potentially we couldn't get the funding, or we weren't gonna spend the money to upgrade the steel complex that holds it there. And we wanted to take it down, or an engineer says it's a hazard or something. We would say, hey, we're not, or we say we don't want an elevated tank anymore. We're gonna bring it down to the ground and have a secondary ground level tank, you know. But what are the chances over the next 25, 30? Probably not. But
So
could
then-
be scenarios.
All right, so in a compromise situation, even if we were both bearing the cost. You know, so if the onus isn't on us particularly, on there particularly. We have it where we want it right now. So under those circumstances, if the town makes a structural change, it would be nice if they were in bearing the cost. They had skin in the game.
Everyone on board with that? With Sprint taking on the cost for relocating if the town requests a relocation?
Or even
Well, right now,
sharing.
vice versa, if Sprint.
It's just for the permits though, right? Correct?
Just for the-
the permit
Oh.
fees, that's.
Okay, just the,
Permit costs, permit costs,
Oh, yeah, right. That's
Yeah.
not a consideration.
no equipment or anything like that, they bear the cost of that.
oh, that's clear.
Oh, that's clear, we don't pay for any of the equipment,
Even if we are requesting, the town is requesting.
yes,
A
that's their
removal,
equipment,
okay.
they pay for it, we don't see any cost for the equipment.
Mhm.
And everyone's
guess my
comfortable
only
with the
concern-
25 years?
It's just, it seems like a
No, I'm
long
not.
time to be locked in to
Yeah,
But you're
this
really
for
not,
3%.
I don't like.
but you're not,
Why?
because you can always cancel it.
So I guess
So
you're
you're-
suggesting if you think we get out of whack, we would cancel the contract and say
And-
we want to renegotiate.
Or
the-
try and see if somebody else wants to come in and do it.
Well, somebody else can come and we can sell to as many we're not limited to just T-Mobile and Sprint, right? We just,
Yeah, but how
Thing.
many things do we want up on the water tank? I mean, you know, at some point,
right?
you've got a farm up there.
Somebody do a calculation, how much, at that rate, how much that, would be in 25 years? She's good at that.
Staff has not.
Not,
So it's 47, what? 47,
83,
83.
62?
At home, I would ask, certainly.
One.
So that's a monthly rate.
Mhm.
Uh, I think it's about $10,000 is what the,
Cumulatively.
Yeah,
over
well, it
the
would be
that's
like-
what the monthly rate would be. In the 25th year, it would be about $10,000. I mean, but that's so hard. That's 25 years from now, like to know whether or not that's reasonable or not. You know, it's just hard to know. It's so, I don't know. I guess my initial reaction is 25 years is a long time to know. I mean, I don't feel that strongly about
I
it,
just- I just-
but
I just feel since we have an opt-out,
Right,
that relieves the pressure. If there was no opt-out agreement, we have a cost to do that. I wouldn't feel that.
yeah.
But
But that's why I
basically,
asked what the cancellation policy was, because that doesn't mean that we can't say to them, look, inflation is blankety blank and you're paying other people X and you're only paying us Y, we're going to cancel. And there's room for negotiating there. Because we don't really want them to leave and they don't really want to go. So you're not locked in, not on a 30-day cancellation.
so maybe we could just ask staff to put reminders, like maybe in 5 years, are we out of whack with this rent or not. If it's really too low, then maybe we should try to explore. So maybe it's more of a reminder on our end
Yeah,
to
well,
see
that's
if the
fine.
rent is reasonable
Right.
or not.
Right now, we have a good rent.
If I could, Glenn and let us, it's not as clear as that, so let us make sure that that clarity exists. That we have that right as well, because right now it's clear for Sprint, it doesn't really be as clear for us as we would like.
Yeah.
So let us go back to them, because that seems to be the
Yeah.
part of the discussion that's gonna change the term. We will go back to T-Mobile and say, listen, we gotta have the same get out of jail free clauses clear in this contract, and we can say that that's where the commission's at. Otherwise, it's not gonna be a 25-year, and we'll use it as a little bit of leverage and see if we can't get something else out of that.
I mean, even if it's a 60-day, if that's still a
Sure.
get out.
But
Yeah.
if I could, are you all good with every 5 years having that option? 'Cause that's the way it would be. It's every 5 years, either, if we.
Yes.
Talking about every 5 years, but not in the middle of the 5-year
No.
term, but every 5 years, either party can elect not to renew.
Oh, so we would revisit the rent
Every
amount at
5
that
years.
time
Every
and
5
how
years,
things
say,
are
"Do we still
going.
like this rent or
Right.
forget it's not. worth it."
No,
Or-
okay, I guess that's
Right.
true.
Yeah, let's,
Or you get a better offer
I
from
do with that.
AT&T or something.
but let's try that. Let's,
Okay.
okay.
Well, so
I
we'll bring
think
it,
that
we'll
makes
bring
sense.
it back.
We'll bring
next
it
meeting.
back. Let us, that helps
We'll
us a
circle
lot.
back.
Yep, yep.
That it wouldn't be some automatic renewal that Sprint gets to,
Right.
use. And that we have some leverage to maybe renegotiate the rent if it's seems appropriate.
Okay, that's good.
And that'd be binding upon successors to
Mhm.
T-Mobile.
So we have our direction and we'll bring it back.
We'll be back.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to commissioner comments. Commissioner Goldberg, you want to go first?
Oh, I would like to thank everyone today that appeared today and congratulations
Sticking it out.
to the two new positions. But I also would like to remark that myself and other members of the commission enjoyed the Florida League of Cities General Membership Meeting on July 26th. And it was very informative, the updates particularly by the Supervisor of Elections with regard to the current status of the vote by mail, early voting, online access, as well as the historical data. I found that very interesting, the party registrations and how it was very liquid in changing. So it was very enjoyable, and I look forward to attending the Florida League of Cities in Orlando in 2 weeks. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to say we have 2 new candidates for the board, and I'm very thrilled that they got the credentials. It seems everybody that steps forward has got these credentials. That's why we live in Highland Beach. And thank you, Richard, for the financial report. I'm glad the board is kind of discussing it and kind of level with the budget. So I look forward for your information, your updates on it. Thank you.
I echo what they've just said, so I'm not going to add to that.
I do as well, and congratulations. I have a quick question. What's the contact point? I noticed, for example, that the stop sign in front of the Sands Hotel has been down for a couple of weeks. Is there a procedure?
You just filed one, so I'll take a look at
Thank
that.
you.
Let me take a look at that.
And that's all I have. Thank you.
Nothing further from me. Anything else from town attorney?
Just to give a shout out to your clerk, Mr. Melville, headed up the Clerks Association, Palm Beach County Clerk meeting last Friday on, what Friday, I think it was, correct? Presenting on election law and well attended. There must have been, I don't know, 55 or so clerks in the room, and she was the star of the show. So hats off to you.
Wonderful. And we are not surprised.
I don't really have any more comments, but we'll bring back the budget to you.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
that, it's now 4:09 and the meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everybody.